Chicken dissection.
General study tips. When testing yourself, draw and label what you know, and then go back and see what you have missed. Create a study guide and ask yourself detailed questions about topics you do not have complete understanding of.
Go system by system to compartmentalize the information better.
And don't cram. Study a few days in advance before a quiz to make sure that you're retaining the information.
So to start with the external anatomy, we have the feathers, in which their functions are protection and insulation. They're made of keratin and they're arranged in tracts along the body. The first feather layer is the alula, going into the primary and secondary. And these are the feather tracts with the capital, humeral, alar, pearl, caudal, spinal, femoral, and ventral. When looking at the head, we have the comb at the top and the wattle at the bottom. The comb and wattle size is dependent on sex hormones and the color as well. And then we have the ear and earlobe, in which the earlobe color corresponds with egg color. And then the oral cavity that is filled with a triangular tongue and has very little taste buds that are located on the back of the tongue and the roof of the mouth. The brachial vein is a large blood vessel found under the wing between the biceps brachialis and the triceps humerales and is used for blood collection in chickens. And then we move to the back of the chicken, in which the crine gland is towards the very end of the chicken, and it's a bilobed sebaceous gland found dorsally at the base of the tail, and it secretes oil that is distributed through preening as the chickens pick up their feathers. And then the cloaca, which is both functions in the urinary tract and in the reproductive system, as fecal matter from the intestines is collected here and excreted. And on the reproductive side, sperm enters here and the egg exits here.
Begin by removing the feathers. We first removed all the feathers from the higher neck to the breast, abdomen, and legs. Gently tent, which is pinching the top of the skin to make a triangle, the skin between the hips to make an opening with scissors or a scalpel. Cut up to the neck and try to keep the structures below untouched by pulling the skin away from the muscles to not damage them. And this is just a video demonstrating that. Proceed to cut down to the cloaca and peel the skin to expose the legs and thorax. Apply downward pressure on the knees to separate the joints at the hip.
Moving on to the hind limb, we're starting with the iliotibialis muscle, which covers most of the thigh and is also known as the gluteus maximus. It is responsible for hip flexion as well as knee and leg extension. Then under that, we have the sartorius muscle, which is responsible for knee extension as well and hip flexion as well. You can find this on the thigh and it looks like a long, thin band. Then we have the semitendinosus muscle, which is responsible for thigh extension, is also known as the hamstring. Then we have the adductor longus muscle, which attaches to the femur and is responsible for thigh adduction and extension. On top, we have the ambiens, which facilitate knee bending. This is a thigh muscle that connects to a tendon and is also responsible for toe flexing. Then on top of that, we have the quadriceps femoris, which comprises 4 muscles and is responsible for thigh extension and attaches at the femur, ilium, patella of the limb. Oh wait, no, and patella, sorry. So the 2 things that aren't pictured but want to be mentioned are in the lower portion of the limb. We have the gastrocnemius muscle, which is responsible for knee flexion and foot extension. And lastly, on the hind limbs, on the front portion, we have the tibialis anterior, and that is responsible for forward flexion of the tarsometatarsus. Sorry. This is a video showing the hind limb muscles flexing and extending. These are general study tips. Part 2, work on spelling. Muscles can be tricky and one letter can make a difference. It's great for memorization. Try a matching game that matches muscles to their functions and try to visualize what the muscles do exactly. This can help make the connection between your notes and real life. Examples of supracoracoideus, when manipulated, can show you wing movement. And lastly, try to learn how the muscles interact with each other as well. This can help with tricky exam questions.
So to start with the deltoideus, it covers the dorsal surface of the shoulder, and it's responsible for shoulder flexion and outward rotation in the forelimb. And then we have the biceps brachii, that is a two-headed muscle, and it's a wing flexor and elbow extender. Then to the left, we have the triceps brachii, in which it's a three-headed muscle, and it functions as a shoulder joint flexor and a forearm extender. And again, here's the brachial vein. It's a little bit more of a deep example. And this is again where they take the blood from the chicken.
Here we have the sternum. This is used as the base attachment of flight muscles, and as pictured, it is located at the anterior aspect of the thorax. And then we have the the windows of the pictures are blocking the screen. Let me start over. Here is picture, we have the sternum. This is used for base attachment, a strong base attachment for flight muscles. And as picture is located at the anterior aspect of the thorax. Then we have the supracoracoideus, also known as the pectoralis minor. This is deep to the pectoralis major and is responsible for wing abduction. And then we have the pectoralis major. This is the largest muscle and is also known as the superficial pectoralis. And this is responsible for wing adduction. Then we have the clavicle, which is also known as the collarbone. This acts as a strong base for the wings.
Here's a picture of an air sac. Chickens actually have 9 air sacs. 2 are cervical, 1 interclavicular, 2 anterior thoracic, 2 posterior thoracic, and 2 abdominal. A good way to study where the air sacs are to repeatedly draw the locations. During the second inhale, air is moved from the lungs to the anterior air sacs and then are expelled during the second exhalation. The air sacs of a chicken attach to numerous different parts of the body, including the kidney and the thumatic bones. The air sac shown is along the base of the keel. This picture was taken after we made an incision along the costochondral junction of the ribs and cut along the ribs. The costochondral junctions are the joints between each rib and the costal cartilage. As shown, the costal cartilage is hyaline cartilage with the function of prolonging the ribs forward and contributing to the elasticity of the walls of the thorax. You can also see the keel in this picture. The keel is cartilage that provides a place of attachment for the wing muscles. The rib plate, which is covered by the costal cartilage in the picture, protects the organs in the chest. This picture was taken after we removed the rib plate and keel. We did this by lifting both the rib plate and keel and cutting any soft tissue attachments and remaining muscles.
Identifying the following structures. Mouth and beak. The beak is made of keratin and its function is for crushing, tearing, and holding on food. They can also use it for fighting, and they are sensitive to the touch. The tongue. The tongue is triangular in shape and located inside the mouth. The tongue has a few taste buds and numerous touch receptors. It's covered in small barbs and it pushes food down the throat. Esophagus. It's a flexible muscular tube, and it connects the mouth to the rest of the digestive tract. It contracts and expands to pass food down. Glottis. The glottis is an opening to the trachea and is seen as a pair of flaps of tissue. The trachea. The trachea is a path where air enters through the mouth/beak and it goes down to the branching of the primary bronchi. It is also an exit of the respiratory system. The trachea is supported by cartilaginous rings, which prevent it from collapsing. It is also known as the windpipe, which a tip to remember the function of the trachea is to remember its nickname for windpipe. Wind is reference to air, and pipe is reference to the passage from the mouth to the lungs of air. The crop. It is a small pouch connected to the lower esophagus that is used as a temporary storage site for feed. A study tip to remember the placing of the crop is the ABC, C for crop, and it's the third letter, which means it's the third structure of the digestive system from the mouth to the esophagus to the crop.
The pericardium is a sac that encloses the heart. It is used for shielding and lubricating the heart, and you can see us pinching it on the left there. And then the heart itself is a four-chambered heart, but the aortic arch in chickens and birds in general goes to the right, and that is the opposite of what's seen in mammals. You can think about this in reference to how birds and reptiles have nuclei in their blood cells, in which that they're different with their aorta. For the liver, it's situated in the abdomen and connected to the ventral body wall with 4 separate lobes. It is this very large structure in the center here. Its main digestive function is bile production for lipid digestion. And then to the right, there's the green gallbladder. Both starting with G is a good study tip. It's a storage site for bile, giving it that green color. The bile is secreted into the small intestine and stored there. It can be seen as a range of greens and sizes, and can be much easier to find in some animals than others. The lungs are the primary organs for respiration, and bird respiration occurs differently than mammal respiration, in which the respiration consists of lungs and air sacs that extend into the thoracic and abdominal cavities. There are 2 lungs and 9 air sacs, as discussed previously, and birds, unlike mammals, lack a diaphragm, and so their respiration is actually a highly efficient process with the intercostal muscles instead. The syrinx to the right is the avian organ of vocalization. It is a structure at the base of the trachea, and it allows the birds to vocalize. The proventriculus is located between the crop and the gizzard. It is the site of chemical digestion in chickens, in which it secretes peptides, hyaluronic acid, and mucus in order to aid digestion. The gizzard, which is the larger structure towards the bottom, is the secondary site of mechanical digestion, in which there are granules that break down the feed inside the pocket there. In this video, we were cutting into the gizzard in order to see its contents. In this, we didn't have granules that were visible, but we did see the food that was being broken down.
So in this, we're going to see the small intestine, which consists of the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. Sorry for my pronunciation. And its function is to absorb nutrients. Then we're going to see the pancreas, which is in the duodenum loop, which is surrounded by the small intestine. The pancreas produces insulin and glucagon. And then the ceca, there's two ceca that branch at the beginning of the large intestine. This is where water reabsorption occurs and contains bacteria that help in digestion of plant cellulose, and it produces vitamins.
Here we see the entirety of the digestive tract laid outside the body. In the previous slides, we were able to see where the esophagus connects to the proventriculus, not including the crop in the picture. We now see the gizzard, where most of the mechanical grinding of food happens, which is then followed by the duodenal loop. Within the duodenal loop, we find the pancreas. After the duodenal loop, we find the jejunum and the ileum, which are the main parts of the small intestines. Following that, we see the ceca, in the bottom left corner, and finally the large intestine, which eventually leads to the vent. On the right, we see the tongue, which was cut from the palate initially, as well as the mouth and the beak prior to dissection. Next, we have the structures in the digestive system. In the upper left picture, we see the location of the vent. In the lower left picture, we see the large intestine, which leads to the vent. In the middle, we see the connection of the urogenital tract and digestive system that leads to the cloaca intact within the animal. On the right, we see the gizzard, also known as the ventriculus. In this picture, it is cut open, and within we can see the particles the chicken ingested that will be grinded and passed through the small intestine. Finally, on the right is a comparison between the mucosa of the proventriculus and the esophagus. The esophagus has a stratified squamous epithelium, which serves as a lining or protective surface in the esophagus, so food is able to pass through easily. However, the mucosa found within the proventriculus is more secretory, as it is the glandular stomach that secretes digestive enzymes to begin digestion. Next, we see the reproductive system. In this photo, we can see that the chicken is male, and therefore we are able to identify the ductus deferens and testes within the body. The ductus deferens are responsible for sperm transport from the testes and are formed to the cloaca. We were also able to dissect the testes out, which are pictured on the right. Next are the kidneys and ureters, which we were able to see more clearly after dissecting the testes out. They're responsible for removal of waste and extra fluid in the body. The ureters run cranial to caudal, mainly from where the kidneys are located, to the bladder. The ureters are ultimately the connection between the kidneys and the bladder as a whole. Next, we are able to see the adrenal glands, which are found above the kidneys, or I guess also the testes, which secrete important hormones regulating metabolism and physiological functions.
In the left picture, you will see the cranium. The cranium is part of the skull that surrounds and protects the brain. You will also see the mandible, which is the jawbone. The occipital, which is at the base of the skull, interacts with the atlas. The atlas is the first vertebrae of the vertebral column and is responsible for the nodding movement of the head. The axis, which is directly underneath the atlas, is responsible for the rotation of the head. The joint between the atlas and axis is a pivot joint, which allows for rotational movement around a singular axis. On the right picture, we will see the main parts of the hind limb, including the femur, tibia, fibula, and tarsometatarsus. The femur is the thigh bone found in the upper hind limb. Its function is to hold the weight of the body when standing or moving. The tibia and fibula are connected to one another. An easy way to tell the difference is that the tibia is usually longer and thicker and the fibula is shorter. The tibia's function is to bear weight, and the fibulas' function is to provide stability to the ankle joint. In addition, the tarsometatarsus joints contribute to the structure of the feet by connecting the forefoot to the midfoot. Right above the hind limb, you will find the pelvis, which is responsible for supporting upper body weight. Within the pelvis, there are three major bones, including the pubis, ischium, and ilium. The pubis, which is found at the bottom of the pelvis, serves to protect the intestines, bladder, and internal sex organs. The ischium is the curved bone forming the base of each half of the pelvis and plays an important role in leg mobility, standing up, lifting, and balance. The ilium is a large bone that forms the upper part of each half of the hind limb and plays an important role in weight-bearing support. Lastly, the forelimb contains three major bones, the humerus, radius, and ulna. The humerus forms a part of the wing that helps with flight. The radius and ulna are connected, and the radius is found in the lateral forearm and is shorter, and the ulna is found in the medial forearm and is longer. Both of those also help with flight.
And these are our citations.
Thank you.